Deputy Bonnie Tully.
And good afternoon, and it's great to meet you all again. And thank you for your presentation. I suppose the most stark thing here is the difference between the approach north and south. Seen as a cross-border body, and it's funded equally by both departments, north and south. It seems almost like what's the south, and it's department's own fault here that they're not getting value for money, because they seem to be concentrating on parental training, which is very important and I acknowledge is very important, but I think it was much more important to put the supports around the child. Like you say, the 60 to 66 children in the north access the programme every year and only 12 in the south. And how do you support the child in the south? You know, one of those 12, say, you know, in the north you're saying it's an all school or a whole school approach where you go into the school and give the support in the school, but you also go into the home and into other activities the child is involved. Is it the same approach used with the child here in this part in the Republic?
Deputy, what I'll do is I'll ask my colleague who handles that, Jill McCanny, to answer your question, if that's okay.
Okay.
Thank you for the question, Deputy Tully. So yes, it is exactly the same model when we look at individual referrals, so whether that's the 60 young people in Northern Ireland or the 12 young people in the Republic of Ireland. It's the same model of intervention. So for those individual referrals, we work across both home and school. The difference then with the whole school model is that we don't work with individual children, so that would be an additional, usually 3 whole schools, 3 to 4 whole schools seen in Northern Ireland, although they are included within that referral number. But it would be 3 to 4 whole schools seen there, and there, in that context, we don't work with an individual child or young person, but instead we work with a team in that school. We set up a team. And we really upskill them then in developing their capacity to offer neurodiverse affirmative practices in their approaches to teaching and learning. And we will, whilst we don't work in the home context within that model, we do still provide the parental training within that school. So the school will invite parents in to attend workshops and to attend training, but very much the focus there is on building the capacity of the whole school, and how they can develop their environments, how they can develop their approaches, their strategies, their teaching styles to best support the need of that whole autistic population within their school.
Okay, so you work with 3 schools per year roughly, so that's over a period of years since what? I know it was established in 2007. Is it since then or since 2012?
No, the whole school model came on board later than that. So the whole school model, I would need to come back to you with the specific year up there.
Oh yeah, no, but it's still very welcome. So you work with the 60 to 66 children, you give them individual attention, and then there's a whole school model as well. But there's no whole school model in the south. No. And how are the referrals made, again, from either, but particularly from the south? So
again, Joey might answer that. There's a particular committee in regard to referrals from the ROI aspect that oversees that and makes those recommendations to the centre. So we don't select the children, they're referred to the centre. So Jill, you might explain that.
Yes, so there is a referral steering group in Ireland that has representation from NEPS and NCSE and the Inspectorate, and they make the selection and refer those children and young people to us. Okay. And we then take it up from there, and we do report back then quarterly to that referral steering group.
And has there been an indication from the NCSE or the department that they want to expand the service? Because you say it's still a pilot programme after all of these years here. Do they want to make it something more permanent and expand it? I know you might be working at capacity level, but is there a possibility of expanding services by increasing the level
So
of
I might
staff?
let the Chief Executive might answer that.
I think the answer is probably yes, and I'm qualifying it because the anecdotal evidence that we're getting from parents and from other professionals is they would like to see the programme expanded. That's one issue. I think then the more detailed issue then is, and the Chair has referred to the landscape review, the planning that both departments are now engaging in with the board and with ourselves. That will probably put that into a much more operational phase. Realistically, what's the time scale for that? Well, we're currently finalising this year, the next year's business plan, and our business plan year runs from the 1st of April to the 31st of March. Okay. So I'm not realistically predicting that there'll be any significant expansion next year. It really takes a period of time to plan and to get a run in so that this is done effectively.
I'll just comment a little bit more on the environment in which the centre operates, because I know, Deputy Tully, because you were in Armagh, you would appreciate the centre is a really unique experiment between two government departments on this island. It's the only body of its type. So like the Good Friday Agreement, you know, respect for jurisdictions to make their own decisions is something that we as a team at the centre very much support. We try and make sure that they have the best information to guide those decisions, but ultimately we allow, you know, both education departments make the decisions that they wish to in their jurisdictions. However, bringing those discussions together, and that's why the meeting in November was so important, where senior representatives of both departments sat with our board and had very good exchange. That means that the information in terms of what best practice in both parts of the island is shared. And that's really what we're there to ensure, is that where we are seeing something successfully applied in Northern Ireland, like the whole school model, that the senior officials in ROI are aware of that. And equally, there are some things that are being very successfully done in ROI that the Northern Ireland officials in that meeting were very interested in. So part of our role is to make sure that that exchange of information around how these services are evolving happens. Now, I am a parent also, you know, of a boy with autism, and I feel it's very important that that voice of parents in terms of the decisions that are made is there, and that is part of the engagement that we wish to do now around in the South. Is the training need still as great? And that'll be part of the landscape review. Certainly the centre's view at this stage is that the expansion of services focused on the child, that is the view of the board, that they want the child's needs first. But we do respect both authorities' right to make the decisions in the context of what is correct for their jurisdiction, and we wouldn't want to be seen to impose anything from the centre.
Perhaps also raised a VFM, a value for money issue. That has certainly been almost a core perception from the day the centre was set up. Now, we have fairly clear routines for ensuring that both jurisdictions get value for money, particularly and the best way of doing that is to monitor the use of professional time. Where do you spend the bulk of your time? And we have a very clear 50-50 split. So even though in Ireland they may be only getting 12 children, you're still getting value in terms of the value of research, training, the production of information, the production of resources based on a split of professional time. That was looked at, I suppose, in some detail in the 2016 inspection, particularly by the inspectorate from Dublin. And there was some work done on that just to be clear that that was happening. And we more or less retained that model, because that was the model which we originally agreed when we tried to put the business case forward in 2012. Now, that's a bit dated and it does need tweaking, but it's still the basis of the current resource allocation. And I suppose there are jurisdictional issues. I mean, we are subject to ministerial agreement. We're not a statutory body, so we don't need statutory legislation per se to make the changes. But it does have to go through the North-South ministerial process, the ministerial council, and the ministerial agreements. We're still bound by the 50-50 funding rules. So 50% of the funding in either jurisdiction means that, to a degree, you're sometimes dependent on the jurisdiction that can afford most or afford least. And that has been an issue in the past, and you'll be aware at the moment of some of the particular difficulties in Northern Ireland, for example, around budgets and things like that. But these are issues that we will be looking at going forward with the two departments, as the Chair has said, and with the board, and planning essentially a phase 2, if you like, of where we take the centre. Our objective is both jurisdictions, both exchequers have made significant investment in this centre, and it has proven to be a successful investment. What we're now debating is the best way of
expanding,
scaling that up, operationalising it so that the benefit is maximised.
Just when you mentioned the North-South Ministerial Council and the fact that the Executive is not meeting in the North, and then obviously the North-South Ministerial Council is not meeting, is that curtailing you in any way, or are you?
No, it doesn't curtail any of the operational issues around how we do our work. we report regularly to both departments, and there's an agreement in place where we produce an annual report that goes through deeper and goes through the departments of finance. So from an operational point of view, there's no issue there. We would provide regular reports when the North, South and the Education group is meeting. We would provide regular reports. Where it will have an impact is if there were to be a significant change in the role, the structure, the function, or the operational requirements expected of the centre, then under the current parameters that would need to go through the North-South Ministerial Council, unless there were changes at that level. And I don't know, I don't see any at the moment, but you never know. So that is where there would be an impact, and there will possibly be an impact in future if the current stasis were to continue for a prolonged period of time.